Okay. I often say I am blessed with good audiences because it's the truth. And I, with your permission, would like to take a picture of this special audience. And this is your opportunity. If you're not supposed to be here, put your hand over your face. And I would just like to have one picture. This is for me, you know, to sort of commemorate this experience. So I appreciate it. And I'm going to turn this over to my friend Nancy.
I guess turn that annoying little thing off at the top of the screen. Go press on and I'll get that. It's the display button. There you go.
There we go. All right, I put this out here for you to see because this is what I'm painting on today. It's Strathmore 500 illustration board. I've been painting on Strathmore 500 illustration board for probably about 35 years. And quite a few years back, it was completely different. It changed, so I called them and inquired of what was happening, and was told we weren't supposed to put water on this. I said, well, yeah, that's beside the point. It's different than it used to be. I didn't use it for a while, and then I talked to Joe Miller, and we commiserated, and I talked to a couple other artists who agreed with me that it was totally different. You couldn't lift on it anymore. So, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago, they made a new product, new in quotes, called wet media. This is Strathmore illustration board for wet media. It is easier to lift on. It's not the same as the old stuff. I'm giving it a new try. It comes individually packaged and in its own envelope with a big glossy flyer, and it costs about almost $11 a sheet. I think they could eliminate some of that by eliminating some of the packaging, but I'm not even supposed to be painting on it, so I better not say any more. All right, I don't know how this system of mine evolved, but I like to start a painting without having any idea what it's going to be. I can spend days just trying to figure out, well, what am I going to paint? What am I going to paint? A lot of time can go by before I decide. But if I just go and start playing with color, I kind of get brought into it by the painting itself. So I like to take either analogous colors or sometimes 3 primary colors and just start putting them on the page. And then I figure out what it's going to be later. It usually turns out to be flowers, but not always. And just to make it a little more challenging, a little more interesting today, I decided to do it with just 3 colors. And as if that weren't enough, I decided to have one of those colors be opaque. I don't know why I decided those things, but it would just, the colors, I was trying to figure out, well, what 3 colors should I use, and it just came to my mind to use Antwerp. These are Winsor Newton colors. Antwerp, Naples yellow, and quinacridone magenta.
Jane, what's special about that paper? Is it the surface different?
Well, it's easy to lift on, which I like. It's a smoother surface.
Like hot press?
It doesn't take the paper the same way as hot press because you can get rid of it. With hot press, it seems to me you don't have as much flexibility. It doesn't cause quite as much buckling as some of the papers. I like the way, I do a lot of printing and stamping and experimental stuff like that. And it's good for all those kinds of things. The great thing about starting a painting this way is you don't waste any time wondering what you're going to paint. Right. All you have to do is pick a color. You can really start by picking just one color and put that down and then pick another color that relates to it. I usually only wet the paper here and there. You don't even have to look at it. So it's a real easy start. And then there's the one decision to make is, you know, what color am I going to start with? Well, in this case, this is a little more thought out because I have a big audience. The reason I only wet it here and there is I like to get both hard edges and soft edges going. So I'm just going to put, this is the Naples, I'm just going to put it here and there on the page. You know, if I put it in one place, then it's going to come through in another. And normally when I do this, I really and truly do not know what I'm going to paint. And these may sound like strange colors, but you would be surprised what you can get out of these three colors. This is the quinacridone magenta. If you ever decide to start a painting like this, you can have really bright colors. That works fine. But it's helpful if you leave a lot of white. Let's face it. you can paint something that you do know what you're painting. I tip it a lot. This is going to measure. Let them mix. If there's hard edges there that I don't want, I can soften them. Sometimes I just sling the paint on like this. But this gets me excited and kind of into it right in the beginning, even though I still don't know where it's going. So after I get this done, to the point where I'm sort of satisfied with it, I want to get these colors to mix. See, here I'm getting some pretty greens, here I'm getting some lavenders. Here it's turning into a deeper purple. Another thing I like to do on this is spray it with water. I like the kind of dappled look that gives. Let's sling a little blue too. But I've still got a lot of white in here, and I know I can lift quite a bit. If you're careful about what colors you pick, you can lift a lot. If you use a lot of staining colors, it's going to be harder to lift, obviously. Then I would take the spray bottle maybe and do a little spraying, encourage things to run a little bit. And at this point, it's just play for me. So I do it until I'm satisfied with it. Now, I don't like all these little dots I put down here, so I'm going to diffuse them a little bit. I'm not going to get rid of them completely, but I'll just diffuse them a little. You can play with alcohol on this too. Not the kind you drink. The rubbing alcohol. I've never tried that actually. People always ask me. I've never tried. I wouldn't want to waste it on the paper. Sorry. See what's happening here? You see the spectrum of colors you can get out of three. There's purples, blues, greens, oranges, pinks. There's neutrals in here. So many times I find my paintings really do hold together better if I use a limited number of colors. Now I'm going to take this away now that you've seen how I start. And I'm going to show you another start I did years ago, just to kind of give you the idea here. Here's a start that was similar, just throwing it around. This has alcohol in it, and it gives these little white dots. This would be an example. I've painted here on a treated acetate sheet, so you can see what you're going to get. I could use that start for a single flower. That would be one way I could use that. Wait a minute. I could use it for a rooster. So you see how diverse this kind of a start can be. I look at it and I turn it around and around and around and think about it and ponder it. One of my friends recently said to me, and eventually the painting will tell me, one of my friends recently said to me, So you listen to the painting. Yeah, that's, for me, it's like a whole conversation the whole time. So this is the start I did with these same 3 colors, so we don't have to wait for that other one to dry. And it does have to be totally dry before you can draw on it. And then I eventually decide what it's going to be. And in this case, I decided on peonies. And believe it or not, this is going to be a white peony with a bunch of buds, and it'll evolve. I try and do a reasonable drawing, mostly just the outer shapes in the beginning, just the contours. Sometimes I don't even finish drawing the whole thing. I work on the area that sort of speaks to me first. So I just wanted you to see the pencil lines, because I know they're going to be probably difficult for you to see once I take this off. So the first thing I start to do is, I love to do the negative painting. So I start painting negatively around this shape, and this is a big light colored shape here. And I really want to get it defined a little more. So I'm going to have to paint darker behind it. I could paint leaves, I can just do a background. I could do other flowers behind it. In this case, I'm just going to use some of the Antwerp and the quinacridone magenta. And get the outside edges somewhat established. And I paint right over what's already there, just as though it weren't there. And keep these edges soft for now because it's early in the painting and I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing. And I am going to give this a little spritz. It gives that sort of dappled look in the background. I like that. And I can vary this color as I go around the flower. But this to me is so much fun because this flower just starts to emerge. It's almost like it's just rising up to say hello. This is the love part of the painting. Every painting for me has a love-hate. This is the love in the beginning, you know, such high expectations, and it's an adventure. And I forgot to tell you, I wear hearing aids, and I really have problems with that. If I don't respond, which I already did that to somebody today when we came in, or if the response has nothing to do with the question, it's the $4,000 hearing aids. It's not me. So if you want to ask me a question, feel free, but you might have to yell. Or my good friend Nancy is a good interpreter for me. She can usually make me understand what people are saying.
The question was, what color are you using for the background?
The only 3 colors in this entire painting from start to finish are going to be Antwerp, quinacridone magenta, and Naples yellow. This is a combination right here of the Antwerp, which is a real bluish, greenish blue, and the quinacridone magenta, which makes it look a little bit more like cobalt or French ultra.
If you were going to use alcohol on it, when would you do that? How would you?
Nancy, you're just going to have to repeat for me.
When do you put alcohol on to get your effects? Alcohol.
And how?
When do I put what?
When do you use the alcohol?
Oh, I'm not using alcohol on this. You could put it in the background if you wanted. I'm just using water. You could use it right in the very beginning. You know, there's no, when you paint with me, there's no rigidity. You do what you want to, and I just follow my instincts. I don't always love the look of alcohol, but sometimes it's really cool. It just depends on what your preference is. I didn't love that, so I'm just going to blend it in.
What does alcohol do?
it makes these marks that I pointed out on here. So it makes these very distinctive round marks. And if it's on a darker underpainting, it's even more dominant. So now I've got some background around this part of the flower, and down in here I've got some leaves. So I'm going to put the leaves in, and they will show other parts of this flower. I like to put down usually the lightest, brightest color that I'm going to have in a leaf or a flower. And then I add the other colors to it, and I try to let them do some mixing right on the paper. And I want to get some kind of dark color down in here because that's going to make this flower pop a little more. And I can even put some purple into it. That will sort of neutralize it a little bit. I do a lot of tipping of the paper too to get the paints to run. You get a smoother look if you can keep the brush out of it. So by painting these few leaves here, the bottom part of this flower should show up pretty well.
Do you ever re-wet the paper? Do you ever re-wet the paper?
The whole thing?
No, parts of it again. Do you do it again?
Not usually. I mean, I'll wet certain areas. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, if I want it to blend first. I'm usually putting down a lighter color first and then going into it with other colors and letting them mix themselves. But you could do the same thing by wetting the area first. I keep wanting to get these darker edges around the flower so it'll show up. What's beeping? Is that anything to do with this? Okay. Did I break something? So here we are with the leaves. So now you see that these leaves here bring out the whole bottom of that flower. And if you only have 3 colors, or 4 if you want to have a few more, you know the painting is going to work color-wise because those colors are in every mix.
Now, Jane, you're creating the look of this flower, right? You're not looking at anything.
Not right this minute, because right now I have the outline drawn and I'm trying to get some darks behind it so you can even see the shape. But I use a lot of photographs. I'll show you in just a second. I have thousands of photographs that I've taken, and I'm not exaggerating. I used them to paint, I used them to draw the outline for starters, so they've already been used. I want to just let this run down here a little bit. I just wanted to try and get most of this flower because I know when you're watching this, sometimes it doesn't make sense until I get one shape kind of defined. And that's too purple. We're getting close. And then I'll show you about the photograph. Let's see, that is the Antwerp without much of the quinacridone magenta in it. It has that greenish look to it. But I'm going to try and be a little more consistent and put some of the magenta into it. I like to put the colors down and let them mix themselves to a certain extent.
What kinds of brushes do you use, Jenny?
Cheap. I'm rough on my brushes, I really am. I do a lot of softening of edges, and I scrub around with them a lot. I do like the Robert Simmons Skyflow brushes, and this one is one of Cheap Joe's, his American Journey brushes. His Golden Fleece ones I got kind of tired of, but I really like his newer ones. I think these are better quality. But I use all different brushes. Another really good brand is, that I like anyway, is Pro Art, A-R-T-E. They're nice brushes. And I like this angled shader. This is another Cheap Joe's brush. I like this. This is very good for lifting. Especially if you want to lift like some thin lines. Like I could lift a vein out of some of these leaves.
Would you repeat that again? What?
It's called an angled shader. You see, it has like the bristles are cut off at an angle. And I use it mostly for lifting. I don't know that that's what it was designed for, but you see how easy this paper is to lift on, and what a nice crisp line I can get using this brush. So we were talking a little bit about the photographs. I have boxes like this. This is just peonies. These are all photographs I've taken. I found the most wonderful containers at Costco that these things sit in. And I think you probably got about a dozen or 14 of these in each one of those cases. And they have a handle on them. They can carry them. I have 5 of them. And they're almost all full. So if you say, do I use photographs? Yes. Now these are some of the photographs that I used to do this. I take great liberties with these things. I do not draw well. And I've learned to use a lot of different techniques to help me. Sometimes I use a grid. And sometimes I just alter it. I can do the contour drawings first, and then I'll fudge it in the center because I don't want to try and do every petal. But that's too limiting. So this was sort of the inspiration for this flower right here. And then I take pictures, for example, of the buds, and I'll take pictures of the leaves. So I have them, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of them. And I use them all the time, even at this stage of their growth. I mean, to me, those are intriguing shapes. And I'll take the buds at all different stages of their development. All right, so I just want to do a little more here. Well, I thought I was going to be able to see the clock, but I can't. Can I?
3.
It's 2:45? Okay. I don't have to paint this all negatively. I can do some positive painting. I like it when you can combine those two. So up here, I have a bud and some leaves. So put down the light green and go back in and pick up some more of the blue and put that in and let it mix itself. And I'm going to use a little of the quinacridone magenta for some of the outline of this bud here. And I want to soften that edge in toward the center of the bud. And I think I'm going to put a little tiny bit of the yellow in there to give it that creamy look, so it starts to relate with all the yellows that are in the rest of the painting. So it's not quite so stark. Do many of you paint with limited palettes, or do you just use every color you can get your hands on? Well, it's very enticing, all those beautiful colors, and I am really a slave to color, but I just don't need all of them in every painting. Too much. I wanted to get this creamy, peachy color. It just never ceases to amaze me, if you play with these colors, or any three, how much you can get out of them. I do a lot of teaching, and I try and start people out. Used to start them out with 3 colors, and the 3 colors I picked were New Gamboge, Permanent Rose, and French Ultramarine Blue. And people got very frustrated with that because they couldn't make a bright, springy green. So I said, okay, we'll add another blue. So I added Antwerp Blue. Now I call it the see if you like it supply list, because you know it's very expensive, and if you go out and buy 12 or 18 colors and then you don't like doing watercolor, it's not fair to put people through that. So anyway, I start them out with the 4 colors, and of course we're all drawn into thinking our paintings are going to look much different if we just get some more colors. And I'm always trying to make the point that you can do almost anything if you have a red, a blue, and a yellow. But it's a hard sell. I have one gal in one of my classes, she's painted with the same 4 colors for 2 or 3 years. Now that I think would be boring, but you would never know it to look at her paintings. It's every color. She can make blacks, she can make anything you want. She can do it with those 4 colors. So she makes the point for me every week when I see her painting. Now I'm never going to get a real bright, screaming green with this combination because the yellow is opaque. So I'm always going to have that kind of soft, mellow look. If you wanted to try this blue and this magenta and you wanted a brighter yellow, you might use quinacridone and gold or New Gamboge or something like that. Then you would get brighter greens. They wouldn't have this soft look to them. But I don't know, I just was in the mood for that this time, so I did it. So there we have a positively painted bud. Here we have a negatively painted flower, positively painted leaves. You see the 2 intertwine throughout the painting. Some positive, some negative. And I'm a very slow painter. This is full speed ahead for me, what I'm doing today. I like to sit back and look at it. I paint standing up, so I'm always stepping back away from it. And it takes me a long time, and part of it is because I didn't have a plan to begin with. Roberta Carter Clark told me, she said, how did you start doing this? I said, I don't know, I don't remember. She said, well, it's the hardest way there is. I said, well, it gets me started. But it does, you know, if you're going to be a good painter, you got to get a good design going in it. So I have to do all that thought process while I'm painting because I didn't do it before I was painting. I want this darker so this flower shape shows up better. Now, at some point, I'm just not going to even try to develop this whole side of it because there's not going to be enough time. But I want to start on developing the interior of this big flower because I don't want that to be shortchanged. And if I have more time, then I think I'll go back to this area. I do look at that photograph more closely as I move along in the painting process because I want to start dividing up the space with the petals. And the way I do that, I usually start with the center and work my way out. If you're doing a painting of a big flower, chances are the center of the flower is going to be the focal point in the painting. So I find I need to spend a lot of time and put a lot of effort into the center of the painting, and I want to make it really pop. Pat Douche used to tell us every flower has red in its center. Well, I thought, I didn't know that. She said, and if you don't see it there, put it there anyway. So, you know, the message over and over again is don't be limited by reality, be inspired by it, and listen to what the painting is telling you. Ask yourself, what does this painting need? Not, this is what I'm going to do. Let the painting tell you. I find that very helpful. And people think I'm crazy, but it works for me. I think artists are so lucky. We get to see things in a totally different way. We're so much more aware in a lot of cases of the beauty around us than other people are. All right, so there's a center that's pretty obvious. And now I want to paint some of these petals in that area and work my way out. Peonies start out, they're these almost perfect little round buds, and then they open out, but the whole thing has a round look until they get really well developed, and then the petals come out and down. So this stuff in the middle, I like to get the concept of that roundness in there. So I'm going to start painting around some of these central petals. Now I paint around it, creating a hard edge here, and then I'm going to soften the edge out there. Now that could be a little darker. It'd be easier for you to see that way. One extreme to the other here. So I do a lot of this softening of edges. If you have trouble with that, you can put the water down first around the petal, being careful not to put it on the petal that you're trying to. I'm getting too much water here for some reason. So every time the color gets a little brighter than I want, I just dip into the complementary colors and it does them right down. So since I already wet this area, it will do some of its softening on its own, some of the softening on this outer edge. So that's starting that circular look, and we'll go around here. Now I could have used blue or greens or yellows or any colors I wanted in here, but I wanted that part of it to really stand out. So I used these brighter colors. See, I'm painting right over all this underpainting that I did earlier. I don't let that bother me. And when you get all these weird white spaces and drips and things, here's a good example of that. I like that. To me, that adds more interest to the painting. Let's put some blues in it. And after a while, these petals will start looking too flat. So I'll have to go in and turn some of the edges and things like that, which will give them more dimension. So here's a petal right here that's flat as can be, and if I put a little shadow in it here, and then soften this edge, it hopefully looks like that petal is curled like this. And there are many places in this flower where I'm going to do that. I have to move away from certain areas sometimes because they're wet, so I can't just always continue in exactly the same spot. At home I have a hairdryer at the ready, 24/7. It's plugged in and ready to go. I don't have a lot of patience to wait for the paint to dry, so I use a hairdryer. So I just continue, and you can see that this, if you have a big flower, this can take quite a while, and I have to simplify to some extent. But see there, it starts to build up. You can see the layers. Nancy, tell me what time it is.
Almost 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock.
But I think I'm going to switch. This is the magic of television. You know, it's like the cooking shows when they put the thing in the oven and they pull it out and it's done. That's what we're going to do. I want to make sure I have time to show you all these things toward the end. So this is basically the same painting. I tried to transfer the drawing with Saran wrap so they'd be pretty similar. And of course this one's much further along, so now you can finally see that it's a flower and there's buds. What happens if you're going to paint this way? I have this one over there. Is you wind up, some areas maybe you want a white or there's something there that you don't want. So you have to be, you know, kind of flexible, I guess I would call it. I wanted to have a white edge along here on this petal. And I don't think I'll get a nice, clear, crisp edge just lifting like I showed you earlier with the angled shader. So one thing I do sometimes is I use a piece of frosted acetate, or this is called translucent Yupo paper. It's just not clear. You can't see through it like you can the other acetate I had. So I put this down where I want to create the white shape, and I draw with a regular pencil, because you can see through it. I draw the shape of the flower, the petal in this case, and I want this little edge to be lighter. Then I take my Fisker X-Acto knife. Have you guys seen these new X-Acto knives? They're great. They fit over your hand like a ring. Wonderful control. Well, anyway, I put this stuff down on a cutting mat and I cut out the shape that I want. So I made myself a stencil, not for applying paint, but for removing it. You can also use it for applying paint. And then that goes down there in this case. And I just take a soft sponge.
Now this paint is completely dry.
The paint is completely dry.
Yes. Thank you. This isn't going to scream at you because it's not a real dark area that I'm lifting out of, but I want to lighten up this edge. And you could tape this down on the paper too. It wouldn't move around so much. But there I have a white edge. And I can accentuate that by painting darker around it. I just want that to show up better. I'm just going to show you over here. Because I know from that distance it's hard to see it. It's a really dark area. Right in here, I'm sure we'll see it. And I know people who have these stencils they've made and they use them over and over and over again. See? I get a nice clear-cut shape. Pat Lafferty had seagulls cut out like that. And she would lift these beautiful seagulls out of the sky with this stuff. She was my mentor. She's the one who got me started with watercolor. Another place I wanted to do some lifting was up in here. Some of these petal shapes kind of got lost. So I thought I would try and lighten some of them up. If you handle this board, it feels very durable. It's strong, heavyweight, but the surface, even with the softest sponge, gets disrupted very quickly. So you will find that you'll have a roughness on the surface if you do this kind of lifting.
Have you ever used the Mr. Eraser, Mr. Clean Eraser?
Yes, I have.
Does that
I don't-
damage the surface as well?
I don't know how it works on this, to tell you the truth. I've never tried it on this. But here I'm getting back some of the whites that I wanted to accentuate. And then, of course, if you want it even whiter, you can go in darker around it. It's just setting up that contrast. So if you're going to paint the way I do, you kind of have to be able to retrieve things at times. So you see how white that looks now, and before it had a lot of color in it there. So as soon as I get a little dark color next to it and I get this a little lighter, even though it's not pure white, it looks whiter. all relative, right? So that does what I wanted in that area. And then this is developed further. You can see I've done a lot of the petals. I've done a lot of the turning of edges. It's not finished, but it's on its way. Here's another one. And at times, I'll go back in and draw more petals. I don't try to do everything all at once. So you can tell I didn't go to art school, right? I was not programmed to do a value study and a color study and have it all planned out ahead. And I didn't know anything about any of that when I started painting. So it didn't become an innate part of my process. I think I'm less limited because of it. Another thing I didn't know, I found out in the beginning, is you're supposed to have white mats on those paintings. That still bothers me. I understand the reason for it, but I don't like to be limited like that. So you see how much lighter this little area looks now that I lifted out earlier. So I'm going in a little darker on either side. If you can put a little light edge on a petal like that, it gives it dimension, it gives it thickness. And it makes it more interesting. It takes away from the flatness. So I would just continue like this, adding little things here and there. And as I said, if you paint like this, you have to be pretty flexible. Because you're going to run into situations, or at least I do, when I've put a lot into it, and it just, and I don't love opaque white paint. I'll use it in an emergency, but I'll do a lot to avoid it, such as the lifting. Well, another thing I'll do to avoid it is collage. I'm going to move this for just a minute. It'll be back. This was a painting I started the same way I showed you today, only this was with really garish, brilliant colors. And I loved it, and I just put a center there, and then I thought, well, now what am I going to do with this? So I started painting in some negative shapes. Of course, it's turning into a flower. And as I went along, this way now, I needed more whites. This was what I had. And those are really bright, strong colors. So I could have used opaque white. I could have tried to lift, but I knew I needed more than lifting was going to give me. So I decided to collage. So I collaged this piece on here, this little piece here, this little piece here, little piece here, and a little piece here. Now you can tell what it is. And because I like to integrate the collage into my paintings, I then went ahead and I painted some areas to look like they were collage that really weren't. Like this area here, for example. Just by painting on either side of a line, that starts to take on the same look as some of the collage pieces. Or you could say it conversely, the collage pieces look like they're painted on. And I did that here and there and everywhere. And this painting was very successful for me. It was so exciting. I was up in Maine, and it was New Jersey Watercolor Society Day, and someone had graciously taken my painting in for me. And it got in on the first round. Well, as far as I'm concerned, that's about as good as it gets. And they were out in the parking lot calling me. It was so exciting. So I know that, you know, it can work on occasion. It really can. Another thing that sometimes happens is I feel like this is just never going to live up to something I want to put my name on, for example. But I love this part. You know, you can have those mixed emotions about paintings. So one thing you can do is paint the background dark and just get rid of everything but whatever the main thing is you want. And I have two examples of paintings like that here to show you. Keep moving this. This is one. Okay. And this is another one. Now these two started the same way and wound up with black backgrounds, creating shapes out of them negatively. So I could do the same thing with this if I had to. Nancy, I didn't get what you just said. Am I out of time?
No.
You got 20 minutes.
I'm just giving you 20 minutes.
Okay, great, perfect, thank you. I have such good helpers. So let's just say, okay, I've had it with this, I'm tired of it, or I don't like it, whatever, hypothetically. I can take part of this painting and use it. Because I put a lot of time into this. You know, I want to have something when I'm finished with this. So I took, in this instance, I use indigo a lot for this. And I could go in and just take that part of the painting. That really pops. I like that. And I like all this crazy stuff that went on in here that happened, you know, 3 weeks ago when I started slinging paint. And I didn't know what it was going to be. So that is one way.
So you did that just to see how it would look?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I wanted to show you. You know, I mean, I would normally, if I thought I was going to do that, I would put down a piece of this treated acetate. I use it a lot. And just see. I put a lot more paint on here and really painted a much bigger area than I normally would, so you could see it. Gobs and gobs and gobs of indigo are in here. So I decided the next time I need the indigo, I'm just going to take it right off of the acetate and use it. So the conversation goes on and on with the painting until, you know, we kind of come to some kind of an agreement. And it's a little too soon in the development of it for me to be absolutely certain what I'm going to do. This obviously needs more work here. I can show you a little bit of what I want to do down here. This is very flat, so I'm going to turn one of these petals by putting a shaded area inside the petal and then just softening it into what's already there. So that starts to look less flat. Some areas over here. And oftentimes too, I am influenced very much so by the color that's already there. So I'll use a color that blends in with whatever was in the underpainting. So I definitely want to do more there. This needs a positive edge up here, or you can't see it. But what color do I want it to be? So I can do a positive edge up here. And blend it down, soften that edge down into this part. And let that just be kind of quiet back there. Everything doesn't have to be as noticeable. So eventually, the time comes. I've had this map cut for a couple of weeks. Because all through the painting process, I keep putting the mat on it. It really helps me a lot. But anyway, this gives you kind of an idea of how it might wind up. And I'm not on your screen. Is that going to make it crooked? And then So that's, you know, that's the process. It's a fun adventure the whole time. I never quite know what's going to happen right up to the end. And you've been a very, very good audience. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you.
This has been wonderful. Thank you so much. I just need the names of the colors that you would
Oh, the
use.
colors that I use? Well, you know, you can use any colors.
No, but what
The ones I
you
used
use?
were
Antwerp blue.
Antwerp.
Antwerp blue.
Yeah, and that's just a Winsor Newton color. That's Winsor, the other brand stuff. These are all Winsor Newton paints.
Okay. And the Naples yellow.
Naples yellow.
Uh-huh.